Hi, I'm Cora Hsu-Laborde, and I grew up in one of the largest inner city areas in the US, Newark, New Jersey. Living outside of Newark for some time now, I've noticed that descriptions of the city have gradually changed from dangerous and unfortunate to revamped and developing. When visiting relatives still located there, gentrification is a word that never fails to be mentioned, even when someone brings up the newest downtown coffee shop or high-end grocery store. Enveloped in an environment where perceptions of Newark were blatantly changing, it was in my interest to find out what exactly gentrification is. The Urban Displacement Project defines gentrification as a process of neighborhood change that includes economic change in a historically disinvested neighborhood by means of real estate investment or new higher income residents moving in. Upon learning this term, I fixated on a key word: disinvestment. Newark was an extremely successful hub of economic activity in the late 1800s to early 1900s due to waterway access and proximity to New York. Considering the success, one must wonder, how exactly did disinvestment come into play? The answer is demographics. Newark experienced the greatest demographic shift of any major city in the US during the second wave of the Great Migration. Millions of African Americans were moving to northern cities like Newark during the Great Migration for better opportunities after almost 2 decades of economic oppression. Simultaneously, white families that previously dominated the area were rapidly moving out of Newark in mass numbers, a process called white flight. The reason, we'll find out in a moment. While there were many discriminatory practices being used on Newark residents after the Great Migration, there were two that played a huge role in establishing the historical disinvestment that we're investigating today. According to the New York Times, redlining was a practice where residents in low-income areas were less likely to receive loans and any aid from lending programs. Federal underwriters drew lines around city neighborhoods and colored them in red to signify that they were hazards for bank lending due to the newfound presence of African Americans. People within these red zones had an extremely difficult time receiving loans or being approved for mortgages. And if they were approved for mortgages, they received extremely high interest rates. High interest rates kept Black people from moving out of Newark, and they also discouraged white people from staying in or moving into Newark. Redlining was a major form of economic disempowerment. It perpetuated segregation and widened wealth disparities that are still perceptible today. As redlining continued, another practice called blockbusting began to be used by real estate speculators. Blockbusting refers to the practice of introducing African Americans into previously white-dominated neighborhoods to panic white people into selling their properties at lower costs. The strategy was to use the racial preconception that the presence of Black people would decrease property values. This process, sometimes referred to as panic peddling, sparked rapid white flight and widespread housing price decline, while also draining Newark of many high-earning businesses and investors. The real estate speculators were able to resell this property to minorities at higher mortgage rates or under misleading home contract agreements because, one, there was a high demand for housing due to the Great Migration, and two, because redlining had already established unfair lending practices. As Newark's white population began to disappear into the suburbs, the city's tax base completely collapsed. Blockbusting played a huge role in neighborhood deterioration and the economic disempowerment of individual families. While practices like redlining and blockbusting are illegal today, their influence still remains prevalent. Though not the only factors, redlining, blockbusting, and the rapid white flight that followed were central contributors to financial insecurity and a reduction in property value throughout the neighborhoods of Newark. It's these low property values that have recently attracted large companies and investors, encouraging them to buy property, renovate it, and use it for some purpose. This is part of the reason why we began to see the vast development of high-rise buildings and upscale restaurants and businesses in the downtown area. Resultantly, higher income residents have begun to move in, raising property taxes and living costs. Now, some Newark residents must question whether incomers will displace current residents who can no longer afford to live there. In many cases, gentrification forces people to areas with even higher poverty levels, further decreasing accessibility to means of wealth accumulation. In my personal experience, when historical discrimination is brought up in schools, it's often met with discomfort. Considering how blatantly unjust and awful instances of historical racism are, this topic can be a hard pill to swallow. However, the importance of teaching this material goes far beyond purely acknowledging injustice. Our society commonly says that we learn history to help understand the present and protect the future. This topic embodies this perfectly. Learning Newark's history is key to understanding the foundations of gentrification, a process that is affecting minorities not just in Newark, but across the country and worldwide. So the next time you encounter any form of injustice, I encourage you to take a moment and ask yourself if what you're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg. Thank you.